So welcome here at the Romanfabrik in Frankfurt to our debate why we shouldn't feel guilty about climate change. It's a debate organized by Novo Argumente magazine and by the Frankfurt Debating Club Vivictis. It's very challenging because James outlines big ideas. He demands for big solutions, big interventions into the current energy supply systems. And he asks what rarely anybody does, especially in Germany in these days, for more cheap, clean and reliable energy in the future. So going away from, instead of saving energy, he argues we need much more.
So don't feel guilty about climate change. Mankind made a mistake in terms of not dealing with carbon dioxide emissions earlier. It was not a misdeed, if you can understand the difference. It's not a morally bad mistake, it's just a mistake. We have made mistakes in the past, we will make them again, but we can fix this mistake. And the way to fix it is at the level of society and of economy, beginning with the energy sector. Nuclear is a relatively new form of energy. I know everybody hates it in Germany. Keine Energie. The thing about it is available now. If you compare it just with wind power, you will find very likely that the safety record for nuclear is better than for wind. Because in wind, it's quite large constructions. Sometimes and so people fall off as they do in the building industry. Sometimes the blades spin off. Because often the blades, as we will see, are still quite primitive. And perhaps the most dangerous thing is British drivers doing what's called rubbernecking. So they see some windmills or wind turbines, and they do this, and then people die that way. Now, really to be serious for a moment, the nuclear power sector has fallen behind in the West. There have been no nuclear power stations built in America or Britain for a long time. I think Germany may be forced to revise its policy against nuclear power stations, but if you look at the history, there's no need to worry. Nuclear has always been associated with nuclear war, and that's part of the reason that everybody hates nuclear. But it's not a legitimate reason, because if you bother to look at some of the history, the worries have been quite out of proportion to the real damage that civilian nuclear power can create. Now, this is Jimmy Carter here. He's the man who first inspired the Greens by telling everybody to turn down the central heating and to put on this ridiculous sweater that he was wearing. In fact, Roosevelt said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Carter said, "Put on a jersey." Right? That's the kind of historical stature of the man. And the other thing he did in 1979 was to say, "I am so worried about nuclear proliferation inside America." This is 30 years before Al-Qaeda. He said, "I'm so worried about terrorists in America, I'm going to, stop nuclear development from 1979 because I'm convinced that somebody will run off with this nuclear material." Seems a little unlikely in 1979, but that shows the scale of exaggeration of the fear when you move through the mediation of radiation. You say, well, look, nuclear war, less of a problem in 1979, détente. But now we've still got radiation, except it's in the civilian sector. And the people who really developed all of this hostility was Greenpeace. They were, of course, Canadians. These are Americans who want to be Europeans. And they decided that being against nuclear war was okay, but now nuclear war was less of an issue in 1969. So they decided to turn their attention to civilian nuclear power. And after 10 years or so, they got lucky with the 3 Mile Island disaster. How many people died in 3 Mile Island? Correct. Nobody died. So ever since, after evacuating the whole area, Greenpeace has always used 3 Mile Island as one example. And the other example that obviously people like to use is Chernobyl, 1986. Now you may notice if you look at the Chernobyl power station, there's one thing missing. What is that thing? Can anybody tell me? The which?
The roof of the reactor.
Yes, or more accurately, there's no golf ball. There was never.
There was never. The Russians
Yeah.
don't have that.
No, the Russians don't have it, or the Ukrainians. Be careful now.
Okay,
The Soviet be even more careful. But anyway, they don't play golf in the Soviet Union. You know. Therefore, we reach a very simple result, which is hundreds of people or scores of people certainly did die in Chernobyl, which is very regrettable. Although Greenpeace to this day maintains that 100,000 people in Europe have died from Chernobyl. That is alarmism. But what we can see is the social regime, the social relations, profoundly affect the safety and efficacy of an energy installation. If you are in the screwed up Soviet Union and you don't have an encasement, then people will die. You need an encasement. You need to be serious about safety. But if you take the right measures, then it's very, very unlikely that something will go wrong. And the new generation 4 of nuclear power stations, which relies on passive safety, means that unlike 3 Mile Island, when something goes wrong, you do not have 40 alarm bells ringing at the same time, like at the end of a James Bond movie, you know, where you go, oh, like that. Everything switches itself off automatically. Less room for human error. And therefore the generation 4 is better than generation 3 and way, way better than Chernobyl. Something else happened during that year, and that was a German came along. And he put forward in Risico Society, I think, the Australian boomerang theory of the future. He said, particularly in relation to nuclear power, anything that we do now may come back and hit us on the head in the future in ways that we cannot anticipate. If we are realistic, the whole of human history has seen increases in energy demand. The EU believes that you can cut energy demand by 13% by 2020. But if you've got Tony Blair as the next president of the EU, I think it's about as credible a claim as he is. Right? Energy demand is going to increase. That's why we need a lot more energy, cleaner energy, better energy. You cannot do it at an individual level. You need to do it at very large scale. So scale is beautiful, not small is beautiful.